Welcome back to another episode of Banging the Can, the Houston sports podcast that does not apologize for championship rings and tings. I am your host, Ross Bolen, and holy hell, a lot has happened since I last checked in. I got the COVID last week. That sucked, as advertised, but we don't have to stay on my personal life. We can go to sports where we all want to be. The Rockets, in one of their best games of the season, and probably one of the more entertaining games of theirs that I've watched this season, fell short, almost took down the Warriors, fell short as the referees remembered they don't give a fuck about Houston or respect any of the kids on our team down the stretch. Brutal watch for Rockets fans who wanted to see another spark after the 7-game win streak. This would have been a big win, obviously, as the Warriors have kind of overperformed, for their expectations as a team this season, while Steph Curry has sort of underperformed as a shooter. It's been a bizarre scene in Golden State, but man, it's one of those things when you have a rebuilding roster and you've got a bunch of young guys on your team that don't get a ton of respect as all-stars or as superstars, or they don't get the calls. And when you're going up against one of the more storied now franchises in the league over the past 10 years, with one of the faces of the league in Steph Curry, they get the calls, you don't get the calls, and that's just the breaks, man. That's the way it goes. It was brutal, but not as brutal as watching the Spurs beat the brakes off of us by 30, as what has become the largest problem for our team. Jalen Green shot 3 of 16 from the field. That was hell. Not great. Kevin Porter Jr. deletes his social media, has been locked the fuck in ever since, really looking like the future leader of the Rockets' backcourt, while his counterpart, Jalen Green, has completely fallen the fuck apart. He's shooting 37% from the field now, 29% from 3 on the year. After, in December, he had his highest percentage for a month behind the arc yet at 48%. But now in January, he's an abysmal 24% behind the arc. That's half. 48 divided by 2 is 24. He's shooting half as well in 2022 as he did in the final month of 2021, which, by my calculations, is not good. It's ugly. Very ugly. Now, the Rockets are 4-6 in their last 10 games, and one of the problems that we are now facing is slipping out of the top 3 draft picks as the Oklahoma City Thunder have successfully started to roll their tank down the mountain. Our tank has stalled out. Again, tanking your own tank is not good. We are in this for draft picks. People keep forgetting, but all of the folks freaking out about Jalen Green, look, KPJ was seen as a project with massive upside. A calculated risk that appears to be paying off. Jalen Green was the number 2 pick in the draft, and top 3 picks are usually expected to produce pretty quickly. And our fans are becoming noticeably shook by the prospect that Jalen Green might end up being a bit of a bust, at least for his rookie season. Now, I'm not a moron, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the 2021-2022 season determines Jalen Green's fate, much less his entire career. But sure, I'm disappointed in his performance thus far. If we're trying to win, which I'm not, this guy might be the only one actually keeping the tank alive. I don't want to drop outside the top 3 picks in the draft. If Jalen needs to shoot 20% from the field to keep us in that race, then so be it. Let the dude work out the kinks, keep him on the floor, especially during the blowouts like we did during the Spurs game. That's fine. Get the bad shots out now. Whatever the fuck prevents us missing like 27 3-pointers in a row years from now when it actually matters, let's get it out of the way. If this is the worst season he ever has, then who gives a shit? And wouldn't that make sense as it's his first season ever? He's a fucking rookie. People need to chill out, screw your heads back on straight, and strap in. We are not even at the All-Star break. We are not even at the trade deadline. That's February 10th. And the Rockets are still expected to be very active. But in what capacity, it is still fairly unclear at this point, because Christian Wood has been rumored to be on the block, but apparently nobody is offering near enough. Shocker. Eric Gordon has been on the block, but apparently nobody is offering nearly enough yet. But this is the game. It's January still. February 10th is the deadline. People start to fucking fall apart and lower their ask or give in to what the other team, us in this case, will be asking for. During those final days, man, it's a negotiating tactic. Teams are not going to tell you right now everything they would give you for Christian Wood or Eric Gordon. That's just not going to be a thing. In one of the more interesting turns of fate this season so far, the Lakers, who have been completely falling apart and just look like an absolute dumpster fire, which I don't think anybody is shocked by, right? That team that LeBron has built over there was just ripe for drama and for this kind of conversation around Russell Westbrook. They badly need to move Russell Westbrook for another piece, which has been pointed out for some time now. John Wall, probably the best trade partner for Westbrook, ironically, on the Houston Rockets. Now, the Lakers apparently are determined to stick with Westbrook through at least the end of the season because they're not willing to put their 2027 first-round pick on the table with him to move him, which is what, teams like the Rockets are going to be asking for. It's just a mess. Like, the whole league at this point is sort of, it's a turning point for the whole league. I mean, we don't really know who the big front runners are right now. There are a lot of teams having a lot of success, but there's just so much still up in the air in terms of who's going to land where by the trade deadline that it's been an odd one. Like when Steph Curry is shooting poorly, it's an odd season. And that's where we're at. So Rafael Stone is the only name whose performance I care about now. So Raf, show us what you got. Make us better. Build our future. But if you even come close to thinking about trading for Ben Simmons, kindly take yourself to the bathroom and beat your own ass. I'm not trying to see Ben Simmons in a Rockets jersey. What I'm trying to see is the Rockets get through this season, moving a couple of the guys, if possible. You don't want to, that's the thing. We are in no hurry. I've seen it said by fans like, if Eric Gordon retired here, they'd be fine with it. I agree. He's a great veteran in terms of leadership to show these young guys how to play in the NBA, how to be successful NBA ballers. I believe that about Eric Gordon. I like him. I've watched him for years as a veteran leader on the Rockets, and I don't see why we should be willing to push him to some other team who's a contender unless they're really going to give us what we want. So if they're not, Rafael Stone should hold. There was a question of whether or not it would be a failure if Eric Gordon was still on this team after the trade deadline, and most Rockets fans agreed on Twitter in the poll that I saw, I believe it was by Clutch fans, shouts to Clutch, that it would be a failure. Now, I voted yes, it would be a failure, and then, having had time to think about that and read more about it and the situation, I agree with the other side of that vote, that no, it would not be a failure. You got to hold your guys of value until you get the value you see as fair for them. That is the way you successfully, generally manage a professional sports franchise. So when it comes to Eric Gordon, when it comes to Christian Wood, when it comes to John Wall, and these pieces that we have to move and build more for the future, you've got to hold until the moment is right. You do not press this. We are fucking 14-32 or something. What are we? 14-32, yeah. Oklahoma City, no, 14-34, excuse me. Oklahoma City is 14-33. We are 14-34. Orlando is 9-40. Detroit is 11-36. And those are the four worst teams in the league currently, which is why I'm scared we're Oklahoma City historically is a very well-run franchise. Everybody saw what they were able to draft in Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and James Harden. That was obviously 2 eras ago, but the way they were able to rebuild so quickly and bring in Chris Paul and actually compete, that's a well-run team that I have to expect will tank properly. So again, that's what I'm rooting for our guys. Keep the tank alive. Keep losing basketball games. Show progress. I'd like to see, Coach Silas continue to take steps and look better than he did towards the beginning of the season. But yeah, man, I'm not going to sit here and freak out about Jalen Green or which pieces need to be moved where. Like, that's just where we're at as a team, as a franchise, we are rebuilding, we are tanking, somewhat unsuccessfully considering, but we are still tanking, we're still right there. A top 3 pick is within reach. This is a draft class that is growing deeper by the week and that people are expecting more and more out of from really in the top 10 picks. You're going to end up with somebody that can do something positive for your franchise. But when you slip outside the top 3, top 5, that's when the value drop-off begins. I don't want to see that. I want to be a top 3 pick. Whatever it takes to make that happen, they need to make it happen. There is no fucking sense in us winning a bunch of meaningless games. I mean, I think we've won back-to-back games, other than the 7-game winning streak, one time this season. We have won back-to-back games. We were like dangerously close to getting near a playoff spot. That cannot happen. Lose. Tank. Do it. And then, no. Don't even pick up the phone if Daryl Morey calls. Don't pick up the phone. Just don't. In other news, James Harden, former Rockets great, second greatest player in the history of our franchise behind Hakeem Olajuwon, had more issues with reports this week that he was unhappy in Brooklyn. Now, you may recall that there were reports at one point that he was unhappy in Houston, and I'm talking about before he ended up leaving, where he came out and said, no, I want to be here forever. I know where I want to retire. There's no sense in me entering free agency. Houston is my home. Now he's saying similar things about Brooklyn in an effort to repair what these reports have done to his current situation with the team. But apparently now he's gotten back into meetings with the management and ownership and reassured them that he is not trying to leave necessarily. Now, where people are looking to the future for him is Philadelphia as a result of Daryl Morey and Joel Embiid's incredible season that is seemingly being wasted with Daryl Morey's refusal to move Ben Simmons for anything less than he sees as a fair price, which again is Daryl Morey's job. But they are in a much different position, the 76ers, than the Rockets are, so you have to weigh things differently. And Daryl, I wish you luck in trying to figure all that out because it's complicated. But yeah, Harden, it's funny to see the same kind of drama drummed up with him in Brooklyn, as apparently one of the quotes, one of the sources, one of these reports said that he's not enjoying living in Brooklyn as much as he enjoyed living in Central Houston. Well, yeah, their strip clubs cannot compete, for one. Hipster-ass Brooklyn doesn't have the same kind of heat that we do in the H. And it's not his scene as much, Harden. Now, that's always been an interesting thing to me for players when they bitch about where they have to play and live. Because it's like, well, y'all aren't getting to do a whole ton of stuff during the season anyway. You're on the road the whole time. You're traveling. You're focused on basketball. And in the offseason, don't you have enough money to go wherever you want, do whatever you want, be whoever you want, hit whatever strip club in whatever fucking country you want? I've just never understood when people put that much stock in like the actual city the team is located in. It's interesting to me. So all in all, Rockets in pretty much the same place they were last time we spoke. Just so much in the air regarding the February 10th trade deadline. These next couple weeks will be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to them. Today's episode of Banging the Can is brought to you by Trade Coffee. 90% of coffee from the grocery store is actually stale. You heard that right. The coffee you know and think you love, it needs an upgrade. But instead of rebuying the same old shit, let Trade Coffee send you something freshly roasted that you're guaranteed to love it. Trade sells the freshest roasted and ethically sourced beans from America's best independent roasters. They ship free to you as often as you like, whole or ground. Whether you're a coffee nerd or you just want a better daily cup, Trade's real coffee experts taste test over 400 roasts and use technology to match you to your ideal coffee based on your preferences and brewing method. You just go take the quiz to get started. Trade Coffee guarantees you'll love your first bag or they'll replace it for free. They've been featured in Time Magazine, the New York Times, Wired, GQ, and they've delivered over 5 million bags of coffee. Their subscription is no hassle. You can skip shipments, change your frequency, or cancel at any time. And the experience is really awesome. You go to drinktrade.com drinktrade.com/BTC. You take the coffee quiz. They'll give you your results, and you're going to love it. It is truly the most delicious coffee that I have had in a very, very long time. And for our listeners right now, Trade Coffee is offering a total of $20 off your first 3 bags when you go to drinktrade.com/BTC for the most delicious coffee in the game today. Drinktrade.com/BTC as in banging the can to get started. Take their quiz now at drinktrade.com/BTC and start your journey to the perfect cup. That's drinktrade.com/BTC for $20 off your first 3 bags. Aside from, the fact that if the lockout ends, baseball should return Thursday, March 31st, there's not a lot to talk about in terms of baseball. You got to hope that these negotiations go well. They held union talks in New York this past week as they attempt to end the lockout. Spring training supposed to start next month. The regular season opening day scheduled for March 31st. But still, they are negotiating around player pay, the playoff format, the luxury tax. And those are big topics on the table that are going to need to get resolved before spring training. So we all sit here, fingers crossed and waiting for baseball because we are in that sort of dark period of the year now where there's, the NFL conference championships are coming up and then the Super Bowl. But other than that, it's basketball. And if you're in Houston and a Rockets fan, basketball is about tanking. So it's not the most fun thing to watch comparative to a team that is competing for championships on a seasonal basis in our Houston Astros. So can't wait for the Astros to come back. Speaking of the NFL conference championship matchups, we've got Bengals-Chiefs, which is not the better of the 2 games in my opinion. Chiefs are favored by 7.5, and I'm not betting against Mahomes. I'm not betting against the Chiefs, not after what we saw. That was the craziest NFL playoff game, Bills-Chiefs, that I have ever seen. Those were the 4 craziest consecutive NFL football games I have ever watched last weekend. That was totally amazing and redeemed everything else about the NFL. The NFL is one of those leagues where it's really easy, especially during the regular season, where it's any given Sunday and you can't really tell and nobody's standing out from the pack seemingly, and it's just a bunch of garbage. And then all of a sudden, there'll be one weekend where the whole season takes shape and it all starts to make sense, and in the rearview mirror doesn't look so shitty anymore. And it just turns out that there's a pretty big discrepancy between the cream of the crop and then you say, the Houston Texans, who are just a laughingstock of a disaster. But we don't have to talk about the Texans today. We don't have to. The season's over. We're in the off season for the Texans. There's no need to harp on them. So we've got Bengals-Chiefs. I love Joe Burrow, but I do not see the Cincinnati Bengals as a realistic threat to the Chiefs. He got sacked 10 times in their win to get to the conference championship, and man, they're going to need to protect him a hell of a lot better than they did in that game to have any chance against the Chiefs and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, who it turns out is some kind of psycho idiot savant tight end who orchestrated the entire last 13-second drive with his meathead brain. It was amazing. If you haven't seen that clip yet, just Google Travis Kelce 13 seconds. And then, of course, 49ers-Rams, which will be the better of the 2 matchups. The Rams only favored by 3.5, and obviously, what an incredible win for Matthew Stafford, a guy that historically we watched just kind of never get what he deserved, it felt like, when he was in Detroit. I mean, I'm a Stafford fan, and I fucking hate Dallas, and particularly Highland Park, where he went to high school. But Matthew Stafford seems like a solid dude. I've enjoyed rooting for him in the past, especially when he was sort of this underdog in Detroit. But now that he's got a realistic shot with the Rams to make it to a Super Bowl, I'm rooting for him. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo has what it takes, especially if you're one of the Texans fans who was trying to push a trade for Garoppolo as our quarterback. Get the fuck out of here. That is not what we want. That is not what we need. But I wish the Niners well against the Rams. I hope it's a great game. Looking forward to it. But not willing to bet against the Rams or the Chiefs. And I really don't like that when I can't bring myself to bet against either favorite. It's a little depressing. So we'll see what happens. We've got the conference championships coming up. And then we wait and see what happens for our Super Bowl matchups, whether or not the Major League Baseball lockout can end. and we've got the February 10th NBA trade deadline approaching. So lots to talk about in the next couple weeks here on Banging the Can, as I am finally back, recovered from the vid, and here to do my thing. Follow us on TikTok at Banging the Can, on Instagram at Banging the Can, on Twitter at Banging the Can. Holler at me, Ross Bolen, on Twitter and Instagram at WRBolen, at WRBOLEN, with your takes, with your thoughts, with your hopes and dreams regarding who the Rockets can move for what, and the Texans and their coaching search, and who you would like to see end up at the helm after all the interviews are done. Now, one of the questions around a lot of the hiring or lack of hiring that's going on in the NFL is why? And the answer is because a lot of the good candidates are still actively in these 4 teams that remain. So while the pieces fall and we see who ends up getting a win in the conference championship, who ends up going to the Super Bowl, then things are going to open up a little bit more, and guys like D'Amico Ryans can actually be a bigger part of the conversation. I think a lot of Texans fans, a lot of Houston fans want to see D'Amico be given a shot. If we're going to give a shot to Josh McCown, who just the mention of his name has once again reminded the entire league that we are a laughingstock of a franchise. The fact that he's even being considered, and really the most embarrassing headline for the Texans I've seen in a long time was the one around hoping that other teams will interview Josh McCown to legitimize our desired head coaching candidate. And by our, I mean Cal McNair and Earthworm Jim, the evangelical. So much can change so quickly. And in the case of all 3 of our main sporting leagues, for the NFL and the Houston Texans, with our coaching search and everything that's up in the air there, between the Astros and Major League Baseball's lockout and Carlos Correa and everything that's up in the air there, and the Rockets and the trade deadline and everything that's up in the air there, a lot of changes could be coming down the pipeline in the coming weeks. Something for all of us to look forward to, I think. Change is not bad in the case of, 2 of your teams being the worst in their respective leagues. So all we can do is hope for the best. Love y'all. Appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Tell all your friends and family about Banging the Can, the Houston sports podcast that does not apologize for championship rings and tings. And we will be back soon with more. Make sure you support our sponsor, Trade Coffee. Go to, drinktrade.com/BTC for $20 off your first 3 bags to support the show and let them know we sent you in exchange for that discount. Thank you so much. Be back soon. H-Town, stay down.